I'm Rena. Welcome to Ag Inspo, the podcast that focuses on innovation and creativity in agriculture. In my travels across the U.S., my mind is blown by the farmers, ranchers, and business owners who are contributing to the richness of the agricultural landscape. My hope is that by sharing their stories, you will be inspired to have the courage to break through and bring an idea you have to life. Hi, everybody. This week on the Ag Inspo podcast, I have the privilege of talking to an amazing woman who has done something very, very unique. She actually has her farm smack in the middle of the urban core of Des Moines. So we're going to be talking today to Monica Owczarski, and she's going to be telling us how she got into this unique niche way of farming. And you're going to be amazed at how much variety she has over a section of the city of Des Moines. So without further ado, let's welcome Monica. And again, welcome to the Ag Inspo podcast. Monica, it is so great to have you on the podcast today. I am very excited to have you here so that you can share your story with all of our listeners. And, rather than tell the story for you, why don't you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you're doing right now?
Yeah, so I run Sweet Tooth Farm, and really what we are doing is growing market gardens on either underutilized, abandoned, or plots that aren't able to be developed in the urban core of Des Moines. So really how we got started, I sometimes joke that we were formed and founded in a city council meeting in downtown Des Moines. But we moved into a neighborhood just north of downtown. And we moved in next door to a pocket park. And what that means is there was a house on just a single city lot up until 1971. And the house came down and the city took over that space, and it was the 70s. So they just thought, put a park on it. But unfortunately, they never allocated funding or maintenance cost or upkeep to that space. And so by the time we moved in 5 or 6 years ago, there was maybe a broken slide and one swing on a swing set and a sand pit. And so as the years went on, those things were even removed. And it was really just like a large litter box. It was not good. The kids stopped coming. And it just wasn't something that we wanted in our block, in our neighborhood. And not only us, we had a group chat on Facebook of all the neighbors surrounding. And when people would be drinking and starting fires at midnight, we would all be like, okay, everybody call the police, get them out. So, it wasn't just like a singular decision. It was really, truly a negative space for everyone on our block and surrounding us. So I just thought, someone's got to care about this. There has to be someone who cares. So I just started calling and emailing and being bothersome. And I started about a 3-year journey working with the city council and most closely with the Parks and Rec department. Because there are good laws, which I think there should be laws in Iowa, about developing parkland or selling parklands to keep those green spaces. But the Parks Department in Des Moines specifically was wonderful at really getting a good feel for what the entire community wanted. So, I got statements and signatures and letters from the neighborhood association and a lot of just people who had more kind of community stake than I did, who had been here a long time, saying yeah, this is terrible. Please do something about this space. So we brought some options to city council and they voted to let us use this space. We're really lucky too that Polk County has a pre-existing side yard lease program existing. And so we kind of just nudged Parks and Rec a little bit and said, okay, cool. We'll do the side yard lease as just an addition to our yard, but how can we work with the legal department to be able to grow a large garden on the space and then sell that? And so we had to wait a couple months for the legal department to kind of figure out how that would work. So after working with the legal department, we had to get pretty significant insurance on the plot because it was still owned by Parks and Rec, and periodically a city worker which they did, we have had the best experience. There was a tree that there was a storm and one of the branches fell down, and to be honest, it was not a very it was kind of a sickly tree and it was giving me shade and I just didn't really want it. So I emailed parks and I said, are you guys bored? Like, will you come cut down this tree? 2 days they were out, cut down the tree for me.
Wow.
So, but those workers had to come on the space. And so, I mean, we're insured for up to like 2,000 acres and 4 million. I mean, just for that tiny space. So we definitely had to do a lot of kind of legwork to lay that foundation down because there is no infrastructure, at least in Polk County, for what we're doing. So that was really the start. And then we did, just to kind of bridge that transition, because it had been a public space. And so we let it go fallow for a year, put a fence up just to kind of help the neighborhood and the kids and everybody kind of transition and understand this is no longer a park. And then our first season, I mean, frankly, your first time doing anything questionable, right? But we've learned so much in the last 2 years. So we're going into our third growing season, and we've been so lucky with the partnerships that we've created with not only the Parks and Rec Department, but the City of Des Moines Municipal Department and their land and the city planners. And so after the Parks Department saw what we were doing, that we weren't idiots, we were doing this successfully, they actually passed our name along to the city. Different departments know each other, but so we now, this season, we actually just got the lease today, so I can probably officially talk about it. With all of our plots combined, we'll be leasing about 3 acres from the city.
Wow.
And so it's all in the same zip code. We're very lucky too that in the industrial area, just north of downtown Des Moines, there are some plots that are kind of weird shapes. They're cut up by the river, and there's a levee on those lots. And so there's a strange building provision and then additional easements that prohibit a lot of building development on those lots. So for both of them, there has not been anything done or touched to those lots since the 1920s and 30s.
Wow.
So I could ramble about this for a long time, but we've had quite a natural progression. I think in my experience, sometimes if you go too fast, too soon, you can kind of bite off a little more than you can chew, but we've been really lucky to kind of have a natural and slow progression. So, we started with 6,000 square feet, and it's taken us 3 years to move up to, having any sort of acreage. So we're really excited about the 2020 season.
Yeah, that's amazing. So talk a little bit about, what you're growing, how you pick what you grow, what you do with the produce, like just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, another reason that we really wanted to do this is that, we live in a food desert. We've gotten 1 or 2 additional grocers, very small, kind of bodega style, very limited selection. And then we just got a Family Dollar, which again, not a very good access point for healthy foods by any means. But, so we wanted to be an access point for those healthy foods in our neighborhood. We really realized that like a lot of the conversations that were happening at the places we were at and volunteering and people we were talking to, the conversations about food are really different than they were at our house, right? It was more of just a necessity conversation. Do you have food to hand out this week? Can I have some? Versus, oh, is this organic? And where did you get it? And those conversations were frankly very privileged and not always happening in the neighborhood. So we just started kind of talking to people. We're very lucky that we're kind of plugged into our neighborhood. And just as a frame of reference, the school 2 blocks away, Moulton Elementary, last year they had over 34 languages spoken just at that elementary school.
Wow.
They have some kids who come in not speaking any English. So we have a vibrant population of people who have come to the United States and who are used to having a very agricultural city and lots of farms and everyone that grows their own vegetables, to here where you have a Family Dollar and a liquor store, and where do I get food to cook? So a lot of things that we grow are just things that people want to eat. And frankly, I don't grow stuff that I don't like to eat because, I was just not interested. So, bounds of reason, but I don't, my thing is not greens and microgreens, more those classic summer Iowa tomatoes, sweet corn, melons, beans, peppers. We do lettuce. I do whole head lettuce, carrots, some root vegetables, just general market garden stuff that you'd see at the farmer's market. But I also do just a ton of classic Iowa stuff. So those, beautiful heirloom tomatoes, sweet corn, watermelon, green beans, peppers. We do whole head lettuce primarily, carrots and root vegetables. And then also, I've had a lot of requests over the last couple of years, and frankly, even if I don't necessarily know how to cook it, if people want it and will buy it, I will grow it. And so this year I'll be doing 3 different types of eggplant. Eggplant is a big seller around here. Okra is a big seller, fresh okra, and then also tomatillo. I've got 3 families, and they will just come in and harvest themselves, and they'll pick like 10 pounds. And that's, they come every Wednesday. So we're really lucky that we have found a lot of these places in these pockets of neighborhoods who kind of had a desire, and we've been able to kind of tap into that. And it's kind of been a mutually beneficial relationship.
Yeah.
Also, there's something to be said about, even if you maybe don't speak the same language, food connects people. And, seeing food grown can be a connecting experience. And so that's been really lovely too.
Yeah. So talk about how you actually run the farm, because obviously with that many acres, that's a very large garden. So talk about how you get the plants in, how do you harvest the produce? Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. I tell people sometimes, they're like, oh, how do you do it? And frankly, it's not rocket science. It's just a lot of really hard work and a lot of time. But probably the best answer is that in the daytime, I generally am at my larger plots working on, we grow the sweet corn and melons or something that they're not quite as finicky as, say, a bush bean or a tomato that needs to be trellised and pruned. And so those go on our big plots. We also grow for some restaurants, and so I have some specific restaurant plots. So daytime, I'm more down there. And, to be really honest, my baby monitor reaches my garden next door. And so I've got a headlamp and I've got gloves with LEDs. And so you can find me at like 11 p.m. out clipping tomatoes. But it definitely is a lot of organization. I already have in my calendar, in my, programmed in succession planting weeks that I look. I mean, obviously that's going to vary depending on weather. Nothing's set in stone for Iowa weather, but being as organized as possible, walking in, and then also just accepting help from people. I have a lot of really lovely neighbors and friends, and people who either are in apartments or just don't have the space or the capacity to garden. They love coming in and getting their hands dirty and participating. And then for that labor, they get to then take home a lot of produce. So we've got a really fantastic core group of people. I've got a friend and a woman who used to work on farms in California. I've got some recent ISU grads. And so I do a lot of scheduling of those volunteer hours. But really it's just, I think other farmers will agree that sometimes you just got to prioritize what fire to put out first and you make it work. But probably the best answer is just being as organized as possible now in the cold months, going into it and kind of understanding the process and succession and what really needs to get done.
Yeah. So, obviously there was a deep desire just to have some community improvement of the space. What has it turned into now for you? Because it's obviously now gone beyond just making an ugly space pretty or making it productive. Yeah. So what is it turned into for you now?
Yeah, that's a really great question. When I think of kind of what we're doing, I think of kind of like you said, building community. And I do think that being in green spaces and being in spaces where food is grown can be healing to people. And there's a lot of kids and there's a lot of people in our neighborhood who experience trauma and who have had a rough go of it. And so we're really, really passionate about getting people into the garden spaces. When I say garden spaces, I just mean all the plots. It's hard. They're kind of piecemeal. And so, it could be the 8th Street. It could be the 13th Street. It could be the Franklin Ave. But it's when I say gardens, it kind of just encompasses all of it. But So I work with the Young Women's Resource Center. We have their Young Moms program. So I am certified to take food stamps for our produce. And so the moms and their kids can come in and, I also think there's something to be said about using your body and harvesting something, working for something, and then taking that home. There's a level of kind of pride or just respect that I feel that I certainly think others maybe feel too. And so we invite, the Young Women's Resource Center. So there's a program down the street that's called Children and Families Urban Movement. It's a before school, after school summer program. And I'm getting started in March already with my 3rd through 5th graders. A lot of them, the older ones, were little when the park was still a park. And now they're able to, I had kids like fighting over carrots, who got to eat more carrots last year. They planted onions, they harvested, they picked tomatoes. They did it all. They would come to the farm stand to watch. And so it's just been a really powerful tool to provide experiences because, not everybody's grandpa or uncle or grandma has a farm. And even though we're surrounded by so much acreage and farm space and row crop, not everybody has those experiences to be in those spaces. And so just providing access has been really kind of pivotal and important for us. At first we just thought we were kind of doing this thing, but now it really feels like there's so many other people and organizations and families who have kind of a stake in what we're doing and who feel connected and who feel proud that this is in their neighborhood or that they helped plant whatever. And so we really want to just keep that going. And I also do think, I have a responsibility from turning what was a public space for 30, 40 years into a private space that we really should be as open and accessible as possible. With a caveat that I have an irrigation system that I don't want anybody messing with, or the beehives I don't want anyone knocking over. So grain of salt, we have fencing up, but at the same time, we are always inviting people in. I have had multiple, Girl Scouts, high school classes, Montessori school classes just come in to be a part of it. And so aside from, being a financial or enterprise that we're running, it's also really important to us to just be a point of access, for really quality product vegetables, but also as a space where people can see a productive agricultural setting work.
Mm-hmm. I was going to ask you about, how you kept people out of the space when you weren't there to monitor it, because you are working in an urban core, and prior to this, your space was being used for parties and mischief, it sounds like. So, have you had any trouble with vandalism or just, kind of abusing the boundaries?
Yeah. On our plot here next to our house, no, we have not. Like I said, we fenced it off for an entire year prior to planting, but also we make pretty good use of the space. There's not a lot of space that is unused. And if you drove or walked by, it's very clear that it's a large productive garden. We do invite people in to glean if they prearrange it. So say somebody missed the farm stand or they can't maybe afford to buy anything from me. If they come and do the work themselves and pick things that maybe aren't perfectly beautiful or wouldn't be like the prize jewel at the farm stand, they can certainly take that home. And so I think having that openness has been something that's really pivotal, but also at the plots down by the river, there have been some homeless camps down there, and nothing catastrophic. We have some melons go, but frankly, whatever.
Yeah,
that's fine.
Yeah,
that doesn't hurt my feelings. We did unfortunately have our tiller stolen. I left it there for one night, and someone actually brought a chainsaw and cut down a huge City of Des Moines sign that it was changed to steal it. But we got it on Craigslist and it was really hard to start. So, I hope they never started it, whatever. But we do plan actually to put additional fencing down at the plots that are larger. But, I will say too, there's also a community of businesses down there who keep an eye out for us. I've gone around and done door knocking and just introduced myself. So they know if I'm working down there at sunset, I'm supposed to be there.
Yeah.
But they keep an eye out for things for us too. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a tight-knit little neighborhood we have here.
That's wonderful. So talk about the bees a little bit, because there's a lot of buzz about bees. So, talk a little bit about how you're incorporating them, and, sort of how many hives do you have, and what are you producing by having them in your garden strategy?
Yeah, I mean, right. So right now, primarily our main focus with having the bees is help with pollination. Having a beehive, an active beehive on a garden space can up your yield significantly, especially if you're planting additional flowering plants within your produce. It can just draw a lot of pollinators aside from bees. It's really beneficial. So in 2020, we'll have 2 hives, which really isn't enough to sell commercially. Kind of going back to that urban setting, we rely on our neighbors not to complain about what we're doing. And so many times, Monica will come around with some honey and some eggs and some bread as like a thank you for when we had our grain bin hauler parked in the alley for a week for not reporting. So we really just use it kind of as a tool to give a special gift, because local raw honey is something that is in high demand. It's kind of like a niche, hip item. And so when you get like a hand packaged with a label that's like not really available anywhere else, it can be kind of like a special thing. So we give it as gifts and Christmas, and kind of as a token of our appreciation for our neighbors dealing with what we're doing. But we also, on the flip side, we mow a lot of lawns in the neighborhood. We do a lot of we grate the alley with our tractor. So, it's kind of a give and take.
Yeah.
But so really 2 hives is not quite enough to commercially sell. That's something that my husband's really passionate and interested in. And I think this is going to be his 3rd year. And, again, that's kind of pretty new. And so we're still learning. And I think that's something that he definitely wants to expand in the coming years. But also, you got to kind of learn, and you have to, it can be disastrous to go too big too fast.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have, 5 hives that have died and you're out $200. So we're kind of building that slowly. I think the goal would be to be able to sell honey commercially. Luckily, we abide by cottage laws in Iowa because we're an independent farm stand. And so we would be able to sell that honey at our farm stand. So that's definitely a goal in the next couple of years, to kind of ramp up and continue to grow our tiny little backyard apiary. But I know it's also just something that's really great. It's a good draw. Every single child who comes in here and gets to stick their finger in fresh honeycomb goes home excited.
Yeah.
And so it's definitely something that we use as a tool to talk about pollinators and bees, and just to get that boost for our own produce.
Yeah. So what is your background in all of this? And, I think it's just really fascinating. Like, what were you doing before you did this? And what is your background, and sort of how did this become your passion?
Well, I've been gardening for a long time, just nothing on this scale. But so I was a social worker. I worked at Child Serve for a number of years. I worked at Irely Bull, a couple other agencies doing casework and things like that, and kind of the social services network. And then I had a child and realized how expensive daycare was. And my husband and I said, okay, well, I guess we'll he made much more than I did at the time. Turns out social workers don't get paid very well. So I decided to stay home, and that was, it kind of was a very, maybe coincidence is the word, I don't know, but that was the year that the final playground structures were removed when I had my first kid. So maybe just all the time on my hands and being alone with a baby who didn't want to ever sleep made me really persistent in all those emails to Parks and Rec. But I don't know. I have this belief that if you want to do something, sometimes you just have to jump in and do it. And if you want to be something, you just have to start being it, and the rest kind of will follow. And if it doesn't, then it wasn't really meant to be. And so that first year, I've mentioned a couple times we didn't plant anything. we did a lot of research and videos and talking to other friends. I cannot talk highly enough of the vegetable farmer community in and around Des Moines. I've got so many people who I owe a lot of thanks and gratitude to for listening to me, answering questions, letting me pick their brains, meeting me for coffee when I have a notebook full of questions for them, who have really just taken me under their wing and supported me. And so just that first year of learning, and then frankly too, failure has been one of my biggest teachers. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just neurotic enough to always be wanting to be incredibly busy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did not even know they made gloves with LED lights in them. So you have taught me something. You've already taught me a lot, but I had no clue about the gloves.
They're amazing.
There's going to be a whole bunch of farmers that are going to be like, I got to get me some of those gloves.
Yes, you can find them on Amazon. They are awesome.
So, it's neat. You took a career that you have and all that you learned from doing the social work and understanding the communities in Des Moines and the need. And now you've sort of taken all of that knowledge and married it to a whole different skill set that you had previous to being a social worker. And now you have this lovely sort of mosaic of things that are kind of coming together. So, what is next? Because obviously this is now getting pretty big. I mean, this is a lot of garden space.
Yeah.
And is your husband still working another job, or is he now working full time with you, or how are you managing?
Yeah. So my husband is the hardest working person I've ever met. I feel like he taught me about hard work, but so he still works a full-time job. So we have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and I'm due with our third in May.
Oh, congratulations.
And so thank you. I'm trying to remind my brain today that like 2 days after delivery, I will not be planting carrots. So my husband's helping me remember that. But we're very, very lucky that he is at an employer and he will get about 18 weeks of paid paternity leave, which is pretty unheard of in the United States. So he'll be home for about 3.5 months with me.
Wow.
To get all the plants in.
Good for that company. I won't make you name them, but good for them. That's wonderful.
Yeah. It's something. With our first child, he was home for about 1.5 weeks, and then with our second, 3.5 months. And it is truly life-changing to have your partner there for that kind of beginning, haggard, exhausted, time.
Oh.
So, and we work really well together. He is my engineer and mechanic, and he's the one who, in that 3 years when I wanted to give up, before we ever signed a lease, he is the one who kept pushing and saying, you can do this, we can do this, we just have to keep trying. We have to just think outside of the traditional trajectory. He is a very ingenuitive person. And so he's actually really excited. I'm not sure if he would agree, but I think he likes to ride the tractor more than I do, and mess around with it and fix it up. But, so he'll be home, and I forgot what the question was. I feel like I'm rambling at this point.
I was just saying, like, is he still working full time? Is he,
sure.
Is he coming in full time?
Yeah, we do, to kind of supplement our income. We do have some rental properties as well. And so I think the goal eventually is to have both of us be running our own kind of wings of this enterprise. But in our third year, we kind of still need to bridge that gap. And so he still is working a 9 to 5.
Yeah.
It's a tough business.
Yeah.
Especially in Iowa, where I don't quite have the infrastructure built up that I can grow year round. And so, from that maybe October, November to April, May is the starving season. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So talk a little bit then about how you staff this. I mean, obviously you're working long hours. He's working long hours. You're out there in the middle of the night, gardening. But
yeah.
So how do you get all the help that you need? Do you have anybody else that you pay, or is it strictly volunteers or people who are willing to come in and kind of do some work in exchange for food?
Yeah. So right now we are volunteer based. My husband, like I said, he's the hardest working person I've ever met. People think that I'm hardworking, and I always say you should meet my husband. We joke that we have like date night in the garden, and that we'll both be outside. We both have headlamps, and we'll just, not now because I'm pregnant, but in the summertime, we'll just each grab a beer and be chatting about our day at midnight while trellising tomatoes or digging out carrots, and that's something that's not don't get me wrong, we're not out there every night, but I'm pretty good at time management. Luckily, I make a lot of lists. I've got a lot of plans. And so we kind of schedule our not so much days, but weeks around tasks that need to be accomplished. And so I'll put a call out if I have a big task, if there's something that needs to be planted, harvested. I've got regular help the day before market. And also my wonderful mother, who I feel like I couldn't have this life or these children without her help, comes and helps with childcare on Tuesdays so I can harvest and prep and wash and get everything ready for market. And so it's just really, like I said earlier, having that schedule planned out, knowing when you need to do things. Luckily, I've got a really great list of people I can either call or email who I can schedule for a 3-hour block here or there. And a lot of times they just, we're very lucky. They believe in our mission and they live in apartments or they don't have a garden, so they want to be out here. The goal is to hire seasonal help. Mm-hmm. That is our ultimate goal. In the next few years, we want to be able to hire 1 or 2 people to have seasonal help for sure. But I think right now with this increase in space and acreage, we want to really focus and tap in on getting all of that space utilized the best we can, A, before we get more land, but B, before we make investments in staff. So in the next 2 to 3 years, our goal is to really max out what we can grow and what's the most profitable to grow on those larger plots.
Yeah. So you mentioned a little while ago that your husband wanted to press on even though you wanted to quit. What was the moment where you felt like this is not worth it? What was that moment where you had to kind of have that breakthrough?
I think, it's hard to say. It kind of is a blur. Again, I have 2 small children, so like my brain is mush sometimes. But, I think probably there were 2 or 3 moments in that process where either we just stopped getting responses from the city or the parks. For me, that's incredibly frustrating. Or, it's hard to sometimes contextualize that one worker at Parks and Rec doesn't really have the final decision-making power, but when you're just told no enough times, it can get really defeating. And then, I'm not sure, I can't remember if I mentioned this, but when we first approached the Parks Department, they said, oh yeah, we'll have money to do something with that space in maybe 11 to 13 years. And so when you're being woken up by grown people who don't live in your neighborhood, who just know about the space and come to your space to drink or do drugs or start, it just, the kind of wearing down of that happening every single day gets to be a lot. And so, there'd be times where I'd send my husband house listings and say, oh, can you just move here? It would just be so much easier. And I think we complement each other pretty well because he's very much long game, big plan, big picture, and I'm very much like day to day checklist for today, and he's checklist for the year. And so he kind of just tried to slow me down. He's a lot more slow and steady, and I'm like an Energizer bunny. And so he would just remind me that we're dealing with government and bureaucracy, and especially if we're trying to do something new, that's not something that happens in a week or a month. That's something that happens over a long time. And so just having him kind of remind me of that kept me going, I think.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that a lot of, business owners, when they're getting ready to start a new venture, they're so excited about the idea. They just want to get going and they don't like any kind of roadblocks that come up. So I think that what you experienced is, it's probably really good that you sort of have that balance with your husband, because most entrepreneurs would quit. It would be too hard. They wouldn't push through. They would have just channeled that energy into something else.
Yeah. It was, we still kind of joke about it. I get asked to do a podcast like this and he'll joke and be like, you remember you wanted to quit. You didn't think that we were going to do this. So it's definitely something that it reminds me to just slow down and sometimes let the process work, even if you feel like it might not.
Yeah. So how is the relationship with the city today? Are they like encouraging you to take on more? Are they like proactively seeking you out to take over space? or are you still sort of feeling like you have to sort of navigate and negotiate each opportunity?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, maybe a little bit of both of those categories would be true. In terms of the Parks Department, they don't really have very many more spaces like this. We did recently, last year, signed a lease. It's through the city, but it directly borders a park. And so we kind of, again, we got the in because of our friends in the Parks Department, and they talk highly of us, as just like we talk highly of them. And so it was another plot in a very middle of the neighborhood urban setting that had been kind of just abandoned by the previous leaseholder. There was a lot of trash and broken items on it. But it directly borders a pretty nice park. And so both of those departments wanted to see something nice. So they actually approached us and they offered it to us for $1 lease.
Wow.
And so we have that really great relationship. Some of the things in the industrial area, if maybe an ordinance changes or zoning changes and land could be developed, the city wants to do that for other business owners, and we totally understand. So we've had to do a little bit of musical chairs, if you will, with some of the plots down there. But when we lost one last year, David Kolvig, who is my BFF down at the city municipal, he said, oh, okay, so this one, a construction company wants to build a building here, but I have this other one that has not only a levee, so it has a width provision, but it also has a height provision because there's some power lines. This would be great for you. I thought of you when I saw this space. And so it definitely takes some navigating, but we also have some really great allies who are, if they see a space that they think, oh, we could never put a building here, they would think of us.
Yeah.
And we're also really lucky too. We don't live in New York City, so I'm not paying $1,000 a year for these lots. We've got those great Midwest prices.
Yeah. Yeah. So what does it take to rehab a space? You're just talking about that space that was next to a park that had broken glass. So are you having to haul in dirt? Or are you just going in and doing, kind of trash cleanup and picking rocks? Or what does it take to get a space ready for a garden?
Yeah, well, I mean, a really important thing, especially in an urban environment, is soil testing. There are some leafy greens that can really absorb toxic substances, heavy metals, so that can be kind of dangerous. So we take core samples of our soil when we get a new plot, just to kind of test what the heck was something dumped here? Is there something in the soil? And so that's really important. So we have a connection with a lab in northern Iowa that we work through with that. But I feel spoiled even saying it, but I asked our buddies at the Parks Department, hey, do you guys have a lot of projects? Could you bring like a skid steer? Could you do this for me? And they did. So they cleared that lot. They brought the skid steer in and they flattened everything and they took all of the debris to the dump. Luckily, I was able to wait a month until they stopped a project, and then the guys had a week where they didn't really have a lot going on. So they thought, yeah, we'll come do that for you. That'll be fun. And then the other two municipal lots by the river, there's just nothing. I mean, they're just grassy. So on those, it's really a lot of soil prep, figuring out what kind of soil is there. One actually had a beach on it in the 1930s.
Oh,
and
wow.
So, yeah, just kind of figuring out what could be the best things to grow on those types of soil. And then, again, just making sure nothing was dumped or left there. Those are probably the most important prep. But we do have a small tractor, so we're able to do some work ourselves. But, yeah, we've been really lucky with the city. And they are very supportive of what we're doing. I'm hesitant to say this, knock on wood, we really haven't come into any really big roadblocks with them or what we're doing quite yet.
That's amazing. So you're in your third year, you're going to have a woman down, so to speak, going into this growing season. So what do you hope will happen with this business? Your husband probably has this planned out for at least 10 years, I'm going to guess, based upon the way that you talk about him. So, what kind of is your goal and your dream for your business in the next few years?
Yeah. So, a lot of people talk about innovations in agriculture. And I think for us, something really important about that is really truly figuring out what our customer base wants. Right? Because I can design a product, but then if nobody really wants it, it's not going to work. And so something that has been so successful for us is hosting and operating farm stands in the middle of neighborhoods at times that people want them. So don't get me wrong. I love going to a farmer's market. I mean, count me in. Give me a mojito and one of those, breakfast burritos. Like I'm there. But not everybody has the availability or, has kids or whatever. So they can't always make it to those events. And so I think in terms of financial moving product selling, we would like to establish more farm stands in neighborhoods that, again, just don't have a lot of access. And so right now we operate one farm stand. I think we'd like to grow that in the next few years, but that just takes planning and staff. So again, we would want to incorporate some seasonal help to get those going. But I think also something that we're really invested in is just steady, sustainable growth. I wouldn't want to get 5 more acres next year without having that help, because that would just be a recipe for failure. And so I think growing with our community and with the needs of the community, and then also kind of refining our other products that we sell, we've kind of determined and heard that a lot of folks who live around here either can't afford or are not really interested in buying a CSA, which is can be kind of expensive to get that subscription from a farmer. It's a great model, but it doesn't work for everyone. Mm-hmm. And so we want to kind of fill that space. And so what we have developed is just a weekly box where you don't have to pay the entire season. You just pay the weeks that you want it. And every week that we have offered it, we've sold out in less than an hour.
Wow.
And so we want to, people want that customizability, right? One week, maybe I've got a lot of eggplant. They don't love eggplant. So they'll wait till the next week when it's more tomatoes, or, whatever the case may be, or they're going on vacation. They're not going to get a box that week. So they want that kind of more tailor-made customer experience. I'm also working with some friends to put together recipe cards for our veg boxes. So kind of like just transforming our products along with what the demand wants to find those areas and spaces that we can easily kind of fit into to make more profit for not a ton more work. Yeah. But yeah, so biggest things, expanding to additional farm stands, refining and improving our other big product, our veg box.
That's amazing. So, if people want to connect with you, come maybe be a volunteer with you, that sounds really super fun, just to come and hang out and do some gardening.
My kids might get you dirty, but it is fun.
So tell people how they can connect with you, follow you, get involved with what you're doing.
So we're on all the big ones. Find us on Facebook at Sweet Tooth Farm, Instagram, Sweet Tooth Farm Des Moines. We've got an email address that I kind of handle, sweettoothfarm.dsm@gmail.com. And I've got a ton of people who've connected with me on social media. I have farmer friends now in like 12 states and a farmer in Norway. And it's one of those, the internet's not perfect, but it's one of those really lovely parts that you really can connect with people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also we're in River Bend, so come find us.
Okay. Yeah. So for those of you who are listening to this podcast while you're driving, or, if you're sitting in a tractor and you don't have your pen and paper to write all that down, just click on this episode when you have a moment. We'll have all of this typed up in the show notes for you so that you can easily connect with Monica, easily connect with Sweet Tooth Farm.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Rena.
Absolutely. Thank you. And we'll be in touch really soon.
Okay. Have a great night.
Okay. You too. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. This is Rena Striegel, and you have been listening to Ag Inspo, the podcast. Please visit my website at tomorrowiscoming.com and find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. If you haven't yet, please go to iTunes and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join me next week for another inspirational episode where you will hear from another amazing entrepreneur who has had the courage to break through and bring an idea to life.